Welcome back and thank you for staying with KTN Prime. We continue breaking down the Finance Bill 2025. Veronica Ndegwa, a senior research analyst at the Institute of Public Finance, and Alexander Rithi, head of programs, the Institute of Social Accountability, are still with me. I'll come to you, Alexander. How would you define Kenya's fiscal framework? And why I'm asking this is because the Public Finance Management Act 2012, and correct me if I'm wrong, was designed to ensure responsible debt management and fiscal discipline. However, that's not the case, is it?
You start at a very good point.
Yeah.
Let me start from Article 201 of the Constitution. This is where we have the whole space of public finance starting, and we have the principles of public finance. And one of them is ensuring that we have equitable taxation, and then we have prudent utilization of resources, and then debt should be equal between the current generation and the future generation. Now, having come to that, currently our debt as a country stands at 11.35 trillion. More than half of that, around 6 trillion, is domestic debt. And then we have 5-point-something trillion is external debt. The reason why these numbers are important is because when you look at the PFM Act that you have just mentioned, it provides that we should have our debt not exceeding 55% of our gross domestic product. Right now, we are in excess of 65%. Meaning we are already in breach of our own law. To make matters worse, in the budget that we are discussing currently, as submitted to the National Assembly, had a budget deficit of 876 billion, of which 592 billion was supposed to be financed from domestic borrowing, and 284 billion was supposed to be funded through external borrowing. However, the report that was submitted to the National Assembly yesterday by the Budget and Appropriations Committee has again slightly increased the expenditure by around 40 billion, while the revenues have only been increased by around 8 to 9 billion, meaning we have another gap that has been created that most likely will go into increasing the debt, the deficit, which means by the time we start implementing the budget, we are likely to be having a deficit of anywhere in the neighborhood of 900 billion. That already means that we are starting in the negative, meaning our budget is not fully financed. So when you add now that particular hole that has been created in the budget into the existing debt stock of 11.35 trillion, and remember, we have not come to the end of this financial year. The numbers we are seeing from the Treasury indicate that we, in the last 10 months of this current financial year, we missed the revenue target by around 253 billion. Around 195 or thereabout was from ordinary revenue, what we collect from taxes. And then the remaining 50-something was from what we call appropriations in aid. These are monies that you pay when you go to access a government service. You are collecting maybe UID or something like that, and you pay something small. So from what we are seeing, the picture I'm trying to paint here is we are financing our budget in deficit, meaning we are going to borrow more and more and more. And already I did indicate that we are already above our borrowing limits. Last week, the World Bank released the economic update for Kenya. And one of the things that was coming out is that Kenya is in distress, in serious debt distress, meaning that our capacity now to accumulate debt, even in the external market, is quite diminished. And that should worry every Kenyan. Right now, it is very difficult for the private sector to borrow money from banks. Because when you go to borrow money from banks, you're competing with who? With government, who is borrowing. If you are a bank and you need to lend out 1 billion shillings, you have one client called government who will come and pick the whole of it and pay you back with an interest of 10%. It's much easier than looking for 100,000 people who will pick this one 10,000, another one 5,000, another one 50,000. The cost of administering this huge number of people is very high compared to government.
Yeah.
Meaning, we are seeing a crowding out effect. Crowding out effect means that the private sector cannot access money to expand their businesses. And when that happens, we are seeing a slowdown in economic activity. And if you read the BPS, the budget policy statement, it indicated that even economic growth came down between 2023 and 2024 by a whole percentage point.
But it's expected to go back up this year, if I'm not wrong, the prediction.
That is where I'm coming.
Okay.
The projected number in the budget policy statement is that we are going to move from the current 4.6% to 5.3%.
Yes.
But we are not hopeful, and we've said as much. The economic update, again, released by the World Bank for Kenya, puts us at around 4.5% growth, which is much lower than 2024.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm trying to say is we are not seeing a very good fiscal environment going forward.
Okay.
And we are likely to have a supplementary budget coming in before we get to December this year, which is likely to even reduce expenditures, because we are of the view that the 3.328 revenue that has been projected, in our view, is already over-projected by around 200 billion or thereabout. Given that at supplementary 2, the ordinary revenue was at 2.58 trillion. And we have a supplementary 3 that is ongoing, which is likely to slash that revenue projection much lower. So then it defeats the logic of if we cannot get to 2.58 in this financial year, how do we get to 2.75 next financial year?
Okay.
That would be difficult in my view.
All right, Veronica, coming to you. Earlier on, you said this finance bill is more about administrative reforms, and it will help with closing loopholes when it comes to tax. I mean, beyond tax revenue, what alternatives should we consider when it comes to addressing fiscal challenges and ensure that we cushion the low-income households or earners?
Before I answer your question, allow me to add something to what Alex talked about.
Yeah.
The 900 or thereabout fiscal deficit we are talking about, and I think this answers the question that Kenyans ask a lot: why do we keep paying debt and our debt stock is not reducing? But what to note is the 900 billion is entirely new debt. So at as of March is when we were at 11.3, so we are likely to be close to 11.5 or 11.6. So add 900 billion to that. So next year we'll be talking about 12.3. The reason that the debt doesn't reduce is that a country cannot reduce its stock of debt until it is in a fiscal surplus. So the rest of the time, looking at the consolidated fund service, the rest of the time the principal payments usually talk about, it's usually borrowing from one person and paying another person. So for example, this year, and this, I was actually shocked to learn of this, we issued a Eurobond in February of this year. That Eurobond was to secure funding to repay a Eurobond maturing in 2027 and a syndicated loan, basically commercial debt. And the problem, and again with that, is that we are borrowing because the creditors can see you're struggling, so then the interest they give you is a bit higher.
Okay.
So then this debt comes at an interest. So then it goes back to the fiscal framework we were talking about. So then we have more spending on interest payments. And now coming to your question, the interest payments for this coming financial year are projected at 1.1 trillion. Our revenue target, and let me work with the ordinary revenue target, is around 2.76 trillion. And Alex talked about the target for this year, but it was revised again downwards to around 2.4 trillion. So moving from 2.4 trillion to 2.78, that would mean we are projecting our revenue to grow by around 15%. Yeah. Growth in revenue this year, month-on-month, monthly, year-on-year growth has been around 3.5%. So even at 3.5%. So we expect growth to be around that amount. And even when we did well last year, it was around 9%. So the 15% will not be achieved. Okay. So again, we'll go back to increase our fiscal deficit. So accounting for those interest payments, we have now accounting even for transfers to counties, which are projected to around 505 billion. Of course, there is a whole discussion around the amount that we finally go to the counties. We see there are very limited resources that will remain for the rest of the sectors. And I think in the budget policy statement, the government was reporting that close to 50% of borrowing that was done went to recurrent expenditure. Alex said we are already starting on a negative. So the programs you're talking about under, for example, education, the exam fees, transfers to university students, and also funding for the free secondary and primary education, we do not have resources. The fiscal space is very constrained.
Okay.
And I think every time we see an underperformance in revenue, the government is usually quick to cut 3 key sectors. The first target is usually education. The second target is usually health sector. The third sector is usually social protection. And these are the sectors that matter for Kenyans because they have a direct impact on the quality of living the Kenyans will be going through. So at the end of the day, we have to go back to the drawing board and see where we got it wrong.
Okay.
Our revenues are not growing as we expect. So we must look at expenditures beyond health, beyond education, beyond social protection. Where can we cut? And I think from the press briefing you were talking about yesterday, there are those areas that have been identified. And sadly, every year when we look at the budget numbers, those are the sectors we always propose to be cut because they always get an increase. Right now, for example, the health sector, the share of health sector for the national budget is around 5%.
Yeah.
Compared to health, to national security, which we can't even scrutinize, is at 10%. Of course, security is a good thing, but then how do we balance between the additional investments in national security and the need for additional investments in the health sector? I've seen a few strike notices by the health service providers.
Yeah.
Why? Because allocation for their salaries is not there. A simple thing like exam fees wasn't provided for in the budget that came from the National Treasury. Of course, that was fixed at the budget committee, but we look at things like what the OAG is flagging. We are paying commitment fees. I think one of them is cancellation of the Nakuru, is it called Nakuru Mau Summit Expressway? Yeah. The cancellation fees are estimated at around 6 billion. This is or more or less the same amount we were looking for exam fees. So then, as a country, we must...
Our priorities are misplaced, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yes.
As you add on to that and talk about how best we can get to fiscal surplus, people are arguing, I mean, as she's argued, here we are cutting key sectors like education and health. And then on the other hand, we have new state departments coming up. And these state departments come with a team, with a budget. We have presidential advisors who are being appointed day in, day out. I mean, priorities once again. It feels like we are taking 5 steps forward and 11 back.
Thank you. That's a good point. As a Uchumi, we've been propagating a narrative that in Kenya today, we do not have a revenue problem. What we have is an expenditure problem. Because looking at the example you've given, the minute you increase the number of state departments by a whole 7 state departments, some of these state departments were just one program in a particular department. Now they are a whole state department. Yeah. It means it comes with a PS and many other staff and a lot of administrative expenditure that will come with it. This is now what is pushing the revenue side. Because you're looking at your expenditures, they are not matching your revenue. So what do? You increase taxes to try and generate more revenues. When that is not working as has been in this financial year due to what happened last year, what do? You go and increase your borrowing. So in our view, we need as Kenyans to focus more now on the expenditure side of the budget.
Okay.
Because it doesn't, in our view, add up to have a whole 20-something ministers, I think 50-something PSs, and then on top of that, you have another 21 advisors.
Yeah.
And then all these people come with, there's no one PS who comes alone. They will come with a PA and a driver, a security person.
It's a whole team.
And so on. So it's a whole team.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't just see 21 advisors. We should see 21 advisors with a team. And then the question is, what are they doing? Is it this, what we are seeing even the new state departments, is a duplication of functions. And when you duplicate functions in government, it is followed by resources. And these resources are the ones that are putting a lot of pressure on our revenues. Because our revenues, and Veronica has demonstrated, are not growing at the same rate as our expenditures are. That is why even our debt will continue pushing us. And you can see now we are even struggling with timely disbursements to counties. I think the report we got from the CS Treasury, is it yesterday? We are now up to May. I mean, up to April. We've not paid what we should give counties for May. So you'll find that some of those counties are also struggling to pay salaries and things of that nature because our revenue side is so constrained. And if you look at the way the PFM, Public Finance Management, works, the first charge is normally debt repayment. So if we are sinking our country deeper and deeper into debt, it means most of our resources are going to debt. The numbers we have right now indicate that looking at our revenue and our debt repayment, out of every 100 shillings that we are collecting as revenue, 60 shillings is going to debt repayment. So you only remain with 40 shillings to pay your salaries, build your roads, offer services, send money to counties. 40 shillings is too little. So that is now pushing us into debt. And that is why the deficit number is now rising to around 900 billion that we are seeing. And in our own projection, we think if we don't contain our expenditures, by the time we are doing supplementary one, around November, December there, the deficit will have crossed the 1 trillion mark.
Okay. Yeah. Just taking you back to last year's finance bill and the protests that we experienced. I mean, the youth and Kenyans in general had only a few, what should be the word, asks when it comes to the government. Transparency, be more accountable, be mindful of how we use our resources. How best can we do that as a country, considering what we've been seeing in the recent weeks, months, or years? Seems like more like it's wasteful.
I think this conversation has come in at a right time. Yeah. I think in the course of this week, the Auditor General was in Parliament and flagging some of these inefficiencies, like us paying cancellation fees and commitment fees on loans that we haven't even utilized. And I think the two offices, the Office of the Auditor General and the Office of the Controller of Budget, are very critical in making sure there's accountability in public spending. But then I usually say we established an office, and the office is Controller of Budget, and the keyword is controller. You're controlling budget. If you read the Controller of Budget reports from 2013, when the office was created, to now, the recommendations are the same. Meaning, we always end at a report, but the implementation of it is not usually done. So the Controller of Budget has an oversight role, and it's to put the right controls in approval of spending. Okay. So the moment she's flagging that we are spending too much on travel and allowances, her office should be, if it's not the case currently, strengthened enough so that those controls are there, so that we do not keep reading that you're spending too much on travel and allowances, yet this spending were approved by various offices, including the Controller of Budget. Yeah. So I think strengthening that office would be very important so that we spend what we budgeted for. We don't spend and then come report back, we spent beyond what we had budgeted for. The Auditor General, Office of the Auditor General, again, it's another oversight institution, and its role is also on accountability. Let me call it a flow, quote unquote, in the law, is that the Auditor General cannot oversee implementation of the recommendations that she makes in her audit reports. That responsibility is now passed to the National Assembly through the PAC committees. Yeah. Now, the problem is that the Auditor General produces her reports, passes them to National Assembly for review, but then beyond now the PAC reports, we don't see the implementation of it. Again, if you read the Auditor General reports from 2013, that issue of commitment fees, people buying, for example, laptops at double the price they budgeted for, have always been recurring. The problem is now in terms of the gaps have already been identified. The implementation is where the problem lies.
Okay.
And I think we cannot separate accountability from transparency and public participation. Right now, we are participating around budget estimates and the finance bill. Nobody will come back to us at the end of the year and say, we planned to spend 10 shillings. We spent 8 because we were able to collect 8 shillings. So we only participate at this point of formulation. But when the budget is being implemented, and even when the supplementary budgets are being done, nobody comes back to us for public participation. And even when it is done, it's usually through an announcement in a newspaper, submit your memoranda, but that is it.
Okay.
So in terms of now closing that loop so that we are budgeting together through public participation, but also spending in the course of implementation together. You're informing us this is what is happening. We are adjusting this spending downwards because our revenue has not met we have not met our revenue targets. And then at the end of the year, come and tell us, we planned to tarmac 10 kilometers. We have managed to do 8 for this reason. So that when even we participate in the next budget cycle, we have a common starting point.
Okay.
And I think that was the whole point of zero-based budgeting that we are yet to see being effected.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to take you back to the finance bill. Now, talk to us about the impact on mobile money, digital services, especially since we are in a situation where majority of the youth that are unemployed, and the unemployment numbers keep on rising by the day. And most of them go to social media as a way to earn a living.
Okay. The finance bill has provisions that are increasing digital lending. I think it's excise duty on digital lending institutions, especially those that are owned by non-residents. So this effectively means that the interest rates that you get from loans that you acquire through the various, I don't want to mention brands, various digital lenders will go up. And when it goes up, it means then even your CRB rating, especially for the young people, will be hurt. And some of them, as they get into the formal economy, they will already be in the red. So that will have a bit of a damage. But we also know that there are also other issues that that provision is trying to sort that are more, they are more moral. They are moral in nature, they are not economic. The fact that you are borrowing and refusing to repay, and then we have people calling us and telling us, Veronica says, borrowed money from us, we can see you are his pastor and or his guardian or something like that. That's a moral issue. And we don't sort out moral problems through economic measures. We deal with moral issues morally, and we deal with economic issues economically.
Okay.
In our view, by increasing the taxation on digital lending through excise, it's going to hurt. And from a human rights perspective, there is somebody who relies on getting that 500 to buy food that day. I'm looking at a student who is stuck and they don't have money, and they have called home and their parent has no money to send to them. They just go to one of those digital lending apps, get 500 shillings, and they buy food for that day.
You can't blame them. They're trying to survive.
You can't blame them. This comrade is trying to survive, and they survive. And once they get now this little stipend from their parents, they pay off, and then they go again and borrow. Now, if they have been accessing 500 and you increase the cost of that lending, it means now they will access less. And even the rate of default is likely to go up, and then the moral issue we are trying to sort through economic means will even become worse.
Okay. Veronica, I'll let you have the final word. If this bill is passed largely in its current form, what do you foresee as the immediate midterm consequences of Kenyans, the economy especially? You and I will be affected definitely, but look at the wider picture.
I think, let me begin with the private sector, and especially around how they comply with tax payments and as well as the VAT refund processes. So in terms of administrative conditions or expectations, the cost of compliance is likely to go higher. But then the broader question around VAT refunds, so this is already capital that you've committed to through payment of input VAT. And now KRA is saying we don't want to take 90 days, we want to take 120 days. So waiting longer for you to get your VAT refunds. So meaning for small businesses whose working capital is very minimal, then that capital is tied. So they're not able to operate at an optimal level. So business activities are likely to come down. And I think even listening to some of the submissions that were being made by the private sector, even when the processing period is 90 days, they never get the refunds once they are processed. So if we increase it to 120 days, it means they'll still be waiting for longer. Now for the specific items like mobile phones, passenger vehicles that have been moved from being zero rated to being exempt, the cost will go high. And allow me to highlight a few others, and especially there's one on tourism facilities, there's another one on specialized hospitals, and then there's also on affordable housing. So from the submissions that the private sector was making is that this will hurt their businesses negatively, and it's true, but beyond looking at the immediate impact in terms of increased cost within these sectors, tourism, health, and also transport, we also have to look more broadly within the question we were talking about tax expenditures and tax refunds as well. So in that context, I think it's important for the government now to have a more holistic approach to tax reforms so that we are not doing piecemeal reforms, and this is in reference with the MTRS. The reason the government is reviewing the zero rating and exemptions is because there was already a proposal to lower the VAT rate from within the first year of the MTRS, which was last year, to 15%, and then within the second year, which is this year, to 14%. That has not been done, but it's cleaning up the exemptions. And then in terms of income tax exemptions, the rate, the CIT rate, corporate income tax rate, was proposed to be lowered from 30% to 25%.
Okay.
So they are removing the exemptions, but they are not addressing the other side of rates. So I think more broadly speaking, because of the impact on the private sector, we are likely to see cost of doing business going up, so making Kenya not a preferred investment destination, and also by extension, because of increased cost of production, a rise in the cost of living.
Okay, that's all the time we had for today, but I'm sure this conversation will continue all the way till next week and past, because we will be equally needing to analyze the budget that will be read on Thursday by Treasury CS John Badi. Thank you very much, lady and gent. Alexander Rithi, Head of Programs, the Institute of Social Accountability, and Veronica Ndegwa, Senior Research Analyst, Institute of Public Finance. That's all we had for you. Thank you so much for watching. I am Ashley Mazuri. Our sign language interpreter was Marisha Witi. Have a good night. Enjoy your long weekend.